Hi, good evening. Welcome once again to the Gildarie Freddie Kissoon show. We also coming to you live on YouTube. You could get that on the Guyanese Critic page. Wherever you are, good night or good morning. It is November the 25th, and you know what happens 1 month from now. I heard some Christmas songs today. So let's get right into it. This evening, we'll continue our series of having some interviews, having some talks, very straight up, frank talks with people in our country, people who knows history, people who would have been there, institutional knowledge of things that would have transpired in Guyana. They would have been in the midst of it, in the thick of things. They are some of the decision makers. They would have been on the fringe. They would have been looking on, and they would have been participating. Over the last couple of days also, we would have been talking to the folks, representatives, actors, producers within the arts field. Interesting talks. But we're ramping it up tonight because in our midst here is somebody who has a lot of knowledge, somebody who would have been in the thick of things, somebody who would have been in the hierarchy of the ruling People's Progressive Party. And now he's here to give his views, tell us a little about what he feels, what he knows, and maybe some advice to the powers that be. And introducing him tonight is no other than my co-host Freddie Kissoon. A good night to him, and of course a good night to our host here tonight. Freddie?
Good evening, wherever you are. Our guest this evening is one of the most enduring personalities in Guyanese politics. Now, if I may get my facts right, and I hope I do not leave out anyone, but for the contemporary leaders in the PPP who would be contemporary with Mr. Ralph Ramkarran, I think it would be Angel Chandapal, who's still around, Gail Teixeira, Clement Rohi. I may leave out a few names, but that goes to show you how long Mr. Ramkarran has been around. But in the 50 years that he's been in politics, 40 of which is with the PPP. He left the PPP in 2012. For the 40 years he's been with the PPP, Mr. Ramkarran has held some important positions with the PPP. He has been in the leadership of the PPP. That would be the executive committee and the central committee. And then he reached the apogee of state service, not party service, state service, when he became the Speaker of the National Assembly. Recent times, Mr. Ramkarran has formed a third party called A New and United Guyana, ANUG. So ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about an encyclopedia, and what would be happening here this evening is additions to Guyana's historiography. Ralph, it's a pleasure talking to an encyclopedia.
Thanks for the welcome.
My first question is, probing your analytical mind, what do you think, after 70 odd years, where we always been, the political economy of Guyana has always been in pessimistic mode, are we what W.W. Rostow called? Are we on the takeoff?
Well, I don't know politically if we're on the takeoff, but things are happening. It's becoming more and more important for Guyana to arrive at a political solution of its political problems. The United States is very much interested in such a prospect, starting with the recent visit of the President, Vice President, and others to the United States, and the meeting with the Vice President. The Vice President and the Secretary of State. Now, we're all well aware of the outcome of that meeting. The outcome was that the Americans expressed interest in Guyana moving in an inclusive direction. The United States ambassador just a few days ago called for the same thing. and in fact called for the two things that, not saying the United States ambassador looks at my views, but coincidentally called for the things that I've been highlighting from time to time. One, inclusive governance, and two, well, she didn't call for inclusive governance. She called for inclusive development and laws in relation to corruption. So those things are still, we're still struggling with those things. So I don't know, it's being highlighted now, and the Guyana government owes a lot to the United States government. So I'm hoping that some progress will be made in that direction.
Thank you very much. I want to, you said something very strange at the end there. Guyana owes the United States. What do you mean by that?
Well, Guyana saved the election. The United States saved the elections. Had it not been for the United States, I'm not denying the role of CARICOM, nor the role of leaders of CARICOM, nor the role of several CARICOM teams that were here, including the vote counters or the Prime Minister of Barbados. But the United States had, I believe, had a dominant diplomatic role in the outcome, and that role was sometimes silent but sometimes open with the intervention of the Secretary of State.
You are the leader, or you were the former leader within ANUG, but you also were high up in the PPP. That statement back, the statement by the U.S. Ambassador, outgoing U.S. Ambassador Sarah Lynch, it would have been interesting in the context that they played such a key role, and then here it is that you have it 2 years later making a statement, and the Americans don't make statements idly, I presume. What do you believe triggered that? What specific actions or inactions by this government you would have seen or you believe would have triggered that?
Well, you have to look a little bit, go back a little bit. The United States has had a long history, particularly since 1992, in aiding Guyana in moving forward on the democracy front. The United States and agencies of the United States had an input in the elections of 1992, the Carter Center. Thereafter, two organizations, the Carter Center and the National Democratic Institute, financed by the U.S. Congress, played an enduring role in the process of the democratic development in Guyana, particularly in elections, where they give a great deal of assistance in the non-controversial aspects of election, education, and things like of that nature. They played a very big role in the Constitution Reform Commission, with all kinds of assistance and so on. So it's an enduring role, it's a continuing role. And it is not surprising that the Americans, the United States government, took a very firm position on the question of free and fair elections. And I think the United States is hooked on the Guyana program. That is to say, ensuring that Guyana remains a democratic country and ensuring that there's progress made in that democracy. And the next level of progress, we have a bitter division in this country politically, and to ensure that there is progress in reducing that bitterness.
Well, there is I don't know if it's a contradiction, but if it's a contradiction, I'd like you to solve it. You said that the United States, the visit by the President and the Vice President, elicited a response from the U.S. government that spoke about inclusiveness. And then you've just said the United States is interested in the endurance of democracy in Guyana. Are the two contradictory? If you're going to have a democratic system, there is no one race or ethnic community in Guyana that has over 50%. None of them even in the 40s. So, would inclusiveness be a burden on the electoral system? If there is inclusiveness, if the government that is presently in power reaches out in an inclusive way, I'm assuming that we will still have free and fair election in which people have to compete for power.
Yes, yeah, sure, sure. Inclusiveness would not eliminate elections, but as far back as 1977, I think, when Cherry Jagan was proposing a National Patriotic Front, it was based on elections. The National Patriotic Front, which would have included both the PBP and the PNC in government. The WPA initially disagreed with that proposal in their program. I don't remember what its name is, but eventually there was a big debate between the PPP and the WPA on that issue and on the structure for a national outcome, a government of national unity. Eventually, the WPA accepted that the PNC must play a role in that. So I think all parties, the PNC itself in the late 90s, came out in support of shared governance, including the current PNC leader, Aubrey Norton. So parties are, I think parties are all agreed as to the scheme of what a political solution would look like. And it has not eliminated national elections.
I'm going to jump the gun here because there's so much more to ask you. If you speak to Dr. Ali, he would say, I am being inclusive, I am reaching out. How do you measure inclusiveness? Does it have to be reaching out to the opposition? Is it possible, Ralph, that you can have a special leader, as there was when Czechoslovakia split up into Slovakia and the Czech Republic, as that kind of guy, where a leader could be a unique person and in a multiracial society, a society that is very troubled, rise above the occasion? Is it possible you can have an Indian or African that can do that? People seem to think that if Hoyt had stayed in power, he would have moved away from PNC ethnic politics. Is it possible that Irfan Ali can do that?
The history doesn't demonstrate that. The history doesn't show that. True, President Ali is reaching out. But President Jagdeo did reach out himself. President Jagdeo went in all the same areas that President Ali is going. Reaching out is good, and you might well have a leader that triggers a different kind of formulation. That is possible. But I don't think it's here. And I don't think, frankly speaking, that our history demonstrates that it is likely. President Ali may get some support from the African community, particularly in this situation, but I don't think it will be significant. Now, what can happen here is, and I think you wrote about it, is that you can have a situation like in 2006, where, for a reason that I do not yet understand, the PNC supporters, and it is alleged, it is said, or the analysis is supposed to show that it was the middle class supporters of the PNC that abandoned the PNC and went to the WPA, because the exact number of votes that the PNC lost, the AFC gained.
Yeah, 5 seats.
Yeah, so something like that can you pointed to the possibility of it happening in Aubrey Norton's case, but you see, it was temporary because it was the leader the PNC supporters had a problem with. If the same thing happens to Aubrey Norton, it would be a demonstration of problems with the leader, not necessarily with the party. Guyana is so politically divided ethnically that I don't see any in the near future that situation can be resolved. It can possibly be resolved with inclusive governance when the ethnic division, the political ethnic division is slackened, is reduced, is less harsh. People might feel more comfortable going to different parties. but not now.
I want to juxtapose a question with that because it's an interesting scenario. The question on the table is whether Irfan Ali, as the president, as his administration is making wrongs, especially with moves, aggressive moves into those community, which is traditionally the PNC or APNU AFC support base. But is the opposition at the moment, and I'm talking specifically about PNC, well, there's no, I think there's APNU still. Are they doing themselves a favor by the kind of representation, and there's been a lot of criticism by what they've given to people? Are they doing it? Are they helping the case? Or is Irfan Ali, regardless what he does or does not do, he is guaranteed a second term? I would love to hear your views on that.
Well, there is no guarantee of a second term because the difference between the two political parties is very, very, very small at the moment. And as you know, both parties, the big, large ethnic groups are both minorities. There is no majority vote. So what the PPP has been able to do is to gather the Amerindian vote. Now that didn't come by accident. That came by real diligent work since the 60s. Mm-hmm. So the PPP has been able to garner the support of the Amerindian community, and that has kept it above the 50% mark. But that is reducing. And at some point in time, the question of minority governments might well come into play. As you said, President Ali is moving around, he's going into areas, making a great deal of effort. I wish him well, but we just have to wait and see how that
Could be,
no, I just have a quick follow-up there. Sorry, Freddie.
No problem.
But would the 2020 elections not have countered that argument that you're using in terms of a minority government? That attempt, or for the supporters of the opposition, that fiasco that played out in 2020, an alleged an attempt to rig the election in front of the world, a blatant attempt, would that not have helped the PPP to, for the next 10 years at least?
No, that doesn't reduce that won't reduce the votes of the PNC. Of the APNU supporters will not reduce their vote to their party because of that.
So
you want to stick with that?
Yeah, I want to stick with that. Look at the history. The PNC was in power from 1964 to 1992.
And yes, and how it was.
They wrecked, absolutely wrecked the country. I was living here. I had small babies growing up in the 70s. No milk was not available. The country was in shatters. They got 40% of the vote in 1992. Even though a large number of them did not register.
Because of who you are and because time goes, I think it's important that we record history here. And if you should write your autobiography, it will be a bestseller. So let's get into history. So 40 years from now, when people look at this program, they can know what's going on. I want to ask you your views on two persons. So you can answer it in one question or we can take it in two questions. I want to ask you your analytical perspective on Forbes Burnham.
Oh.
Was Forbes Burnham a demonic person?
No, he was not a demonic person. Forbes Burnham was driven by the desire to have and hold power, basically. That's what, I don't think he had anything specific. His policy came out as anti-Indian because he deprived the Indian community of the right to vote by stealing votes and keeping himself in power. But I don't think that was specifically directed against Indians. It appeared to be, and it had to be, because the basic question is Burnham wanted to remain in office.
That's an interesting.
What about some of the subsequent behavior patterns that a political analyst can call evil? In the midst of rigging election, you declare your party paramount. You know, those kinds of things. I mean,
Burnham got carried away. Burnham got carried away at a particular time in history, both in Guyana and in the world at the time, in the socialist world which was in existence and appeared to be strong, and Barnum had the support of the Cuban government, and that is why he was able to do. He wanted to do that, to consolidate power. All the time he had dictatorial instincts. He had power. He wanted to increase it to ensure that he remained in power. He knew he was there illegally, and he had to take all kind of steps to. That is why the court system, the judiciary, the military, the police, everybody was ensured that they were supporting him and loyal to him and so on. The question was power, and he used all of these things. The instruments of the state, merged the party and the state, the National Ministry of National Development and so on, merging the party and the state, and promoted paramountcy of the party. All of that was to strengthen his power and keep it going.
Do you think he deliberately, in a whirlpool of emotion, he was responsible for Rodney death, or was it deliberate planning?
I don't know if Barnum deliberate planned anything. I think he was ultimately responsible. The commission said he knew about it. That was their finding.
And why didn't say you can't? Why didn't tell his people, look, you can't kill a man like that? The man is so globally known.
He was afraid that Rodney would remove him. Rodney was a very attractive and charismatic leader, and he was. They had penetrated the army. I don't think they were penetrated seriously, but they had penetrated the army. They had a base in Linden. They were mobilizing, and he became afraid that this is going to be a threat to me down the road.
Now I'm asking you, do you believe the plot was presented to him and he just said, as Tyrone Ferguson said, they didn't bother to tell him, or the plot was presented to him and he approved it?
I don't know what happened, but look, how these things would normally happen. Barnum would tell somebody in whom he had the greatest of confidence to get this thing going. And he was kept out of it after that.
You made an iconoclastic revisionist statement that you need to spend some time here this evening and explain. I cannot, when you made that statement, it was never said, anything like that was never published before.
What is that?
You wrote that WPA, in the height of the anti-dictatorship struggle, would meet weekly, you representing the PPP, Thomas and other people representing the PPP. And this dialogue, this rendezvous continued. And then the WPA was planning a day of revolt against Barnum. They referred to it as the day of resistance. And when it was taking shape, when it was about to dawn, the dialogue was going on at Gimpex in Regent Street, according to you, and you said to Thomas, well, can you tell us about this day of resistance? And Thomas said, according to you, no, we want people to guess. How could you remove a government by telling the major party with enormous reach in the country, a party with a trade union, party with a leader that has global standing, party with resources? You do not bring them into the frame, but you tell one of the leaders, we want people to guess. What?
This is a very important event, and of course I never mentioned it before, but these meetings were ongoing for about a year, and the three persons who were there all the time were Chetty, myself, and Nocta. Occasionally Nocta was absent. Occasionally I was absent. Sometimes I think Gail was there a few times, and one or two others. But we were the people who were there present most of the time. And at that last meeting, the reason why I didn't mention, because Cherry asked me, called me in, and said, at the meeting, I want you to raise this issue. Well, he didn't know that Rodney was not going to be there. He wanted me to raise the issue and find out what's going on. We need to know what's happening. I didn't raise it to the meeting because the team was different. The WPA team was different. Was not the regular team. Was not Rodney, was not Ogunsai. Was Clive Thomas. I think Rupert was there, and there were other people there. So I didn't feel comfortable in raising an issue of that nature. Well, I did raise it with Clive privately, and that's what Clive said. I don't know if Clive would remember. Ogunsai hasn't said anything about it. I didn't ask Clive in his presence, but he hasn't said anything about those meetings. He hasn't denied those meetings were taking place.
But you didn't find it
I find
extremely
it odd.
insane that
I found it
how
odd.
could you remove a government or put pressure on them
I found it
as
odd
small as
because-
the WPA without incorporating the energy of the major Leviathan?
Yeah, at that time we were very close. I could, I mean, I don't deny that there may have been suspicions of all kinds. They may not have trusted the PPP. There was one view that anything that Chelly is told, you go and tell Burnham. I don't know what insanity is that. Where they got that kind of insanity from.
That came from the WPA?
That doesn't come from the WPA, but there was a view expressed by some people that, you couldn't tell Cherry anything because you'd go and tell Burnham. So there was I think there was a suspicion there. I don't think Rodney had a suspicion, but remember that some people in the WPA had long had disagreements with the PPP. So I don't know what happened, but clearly the integration was not so.
And you would say it's because of the lack of alliance on that fateful week that it collapsed?
Freddie, I think you have to go a little bit deeper into the
Well, please do.
into the.
History's been recorded. Please do.
I think you need to go a bit deeper into the nature of these groups. The PPP was a traditional Marxist-Leninist party that had a specific view as to when a revolution can take place and when it cannot take place. In the view of the PPP, all through the years of the PNC, a revolutionary situation never arose because of the big division in the working class. The way they saw that division can be healed is through the trade union movement, and through, if not the official trade union movement, workers themselves joining together and taking action. And the PPP felt that one test of that is when you can call a general strike and the whole country can close down. So that situation did not arise, and the PPP did not see a revolutionary situation existing in Guyana, right? When the WPA was a different political party of a different nature.
It's predominantly middle class
It's a
too.
political party of what we call revolutionary Democrats. And their characterizations of revolutionary Democrats, I'm not saying anything bad or criticizing the WP, but they tend to have a less formed view of when you can have a revolutionary overthrow of a government. They are usually hasty. They usually take actions, and you look at history, they usually take actions when the time is not right. Many of them have been smashed. They've been smashed because they were too precipitate in their action. And I think because of the nature of the WPA, that is why they saw that the removal of Burnham was a possibility. And they told him so in public meetings. They saw the removal of Burnham as a distinct possibility, and made a move to that effect. It would not have been successful. It was not successful.
Now, I said two person. Just a minute. Please indulge me. I said I wanted your opinion in Burnham because of the historical importance of your recording of history. And I'd like your opinion of Nagamutu. You wrote a column saying, where is Nagamutu? I would say, Ralph, that Nagamutu has taken an ignominious exit from Guyanese politics. And I think it's disturbing.
You know, I once asked Vishnu Bisram, who had been for many years a close friend of Nagamutu and promoted him quite a lot. And they're both from Berbice. I don't know if Bisram is from Wim, but I know he's from Berbice. So I asked him this question. I said, if 10 years, this is a few years back, when Moses began to unravel, I said, if 10 years ago I had told you that if Moses Nagamutu were to put himself forward for president when Cherry is no longer available, that he will not get more than 2 votes, would you have physically assaulted me? He said, I would have physically assaulted you.
Bisram told you that?
Bisram told me that. Now, he didn't mean that, of course, but so strong, he meant to say so strong was his belief and support of Nagamutu. When his view of Nagamutu began to unravel, he then realized that the Nagamutu he was now seeing was not the Nagamutu he thought he knew. So Nagamutu fooled a lot of people in this country. At no time in the leadership of the people, no time in the leadership of the PPP was Nagamutu a figure that he promoted himself to be outside of the PPP. Nobody would have supported Nagamutu for any kind of serious position. No one.
Did you hear that?
No one.
Would have supported.
But that is not what the public view of Nagamutu was. The public view of Nagamutu was that he was right at the tip of the PPP's leadership. That you know, if Cherry goes, he is one of the persons there who is likely to succeed. That was never the case. Never the case.
Gildarie?
I don't know. So there's no truth to the rumors that there was any deathbed whispers or anything.
No, not at all.
He said when him and Jagan was in a tour, I didn't let him over Panuli, and he said during the meeting of the people, Jagan said, "Look, my successor."
Francis Abraham was there. I can't tell you what Francis Abraham said, but Francis Abraham was there. He was the ADC to President Jagan, and he heard what transpired.
Thank you very much. I want to ask you, jump right ahead into present times. And ladies and gentlemen, if you're now joining us, it is Mr. Ralph Ramkarran, very senior attorney at law, former Speaker of the National Assembly as well. Don't think Freddie mentioned that. Did you mention that?
That he was
the former Speaker of the House.
I did say that.
So,
Where were you?
I don't know, I slept away a little. But Mr. Ralph Ramkarran, the AFC would have been participating or collaborating with the APNO, and they were part of the last government. Is there any place between now and 2025, sir, for a third force? No, sorry, let me rephrase that. Will any third force be able to make it and make some dents into the current status quo?
Well, I can give you this background. When we found ANUG, we believed that the few of us who got together and had an initial discussion, we believed that the time was ripe for a third force to gain support from the electorate. We felt that the AFC was fading. It was in government and it was fading, and that a third force would be able to win support. After 2006, the AFC began to attract a growing number of supporters of the PPP, particularly as a result of the PPP's disenchantment of sugar workers and so on. So we felt that we will get those and other support in the AFC, and we will get a few seats. Our objective was to ensure that no political party gains an absolute majority. Now, it didn't work. It didn't happen. So it is difficult for me to predict what will happen in a situation where we now have oil, petroleum, more money is going around and so on. But I think that the history has shown that a third force can succeed, can get enough votes to play a role. The history that has shown that is the UF and the AFC. So to sustain that role, to sustain a creative role, a third force, the policy itself must be creative. And if they obtain seats in the National Assembly, they must have creative policies. You can't join in either party in government. That's a death trap.
What are the prospects of AFC at the moment?
Well, the AFC is declining. The AFC is declining because they did exactly what they shouldn't have done: joined a political party in government.
If this guy Nagamutu was so ambitious, and everybody was saying that the overt ambition, the runaway ambition of this guy, even when he was in the PPP, made people suspicious of him. But then he got what he wanted. He became deputy in second person in charge of the Guyana government. But he was never even 10th in charge. How do you explain that?
Well, he was just there as he had no PPP. They say the same thing about the prime ministers under the PPP, Sam Hines and
But they had much more. Sam
Hines had
yes, I know that.
a mandate. Sam Hines, as a result of his mandate, Sam Hines is an expert on the mining industry. Up to now, he wrote a letter. Up to a week ago, he wrote a letter on mining. Sam is an expert on the mining industry. The current prime minister, I don't know much about him and his activity, but he has a mandate. He's in electricity and all kinds of things he's working at. Moses had nothing to do except the Chronicle. No, absolutely nothing.
Is that true? I was told that he was chairing on the what we call it, I think the cabinet. He was chairing the committee that was in charge of how you say it, procurement, the national contracts.
That the PNC circumvented that, even though he was chairman of that.
Right.
Absolute state power resided in the president and Joe Harmon, so they could have override that, and the PNC leaders in government,
explain that to me. I'm awarding contracts.
I could explain that. The shape and form of power vis-a-vis.
But I understand how it could be thinking, but you are awarding contract under those no objection.
But Harmon would have had to approve of that if Nagamutu committee, whatever committee Nagamutu decided on, would never have to go back to cabinet.
Those things don't mean anything. Nothing job.
Before Freddie jump in, how do you rate Irfan Ali and his performance?
Oh, he's doing very well, I think. I'm very surprised. Not surprised, but I know Irfan a long time, and he talks a lot, as he's doing now. So I had two people who I know very well. One's a client both are clients who went to him on matters. And they both came back and said, well, he promised this, he promised that. I said, a promise? He said, no. He made promise A, he picked up the phone and gave instructions. He made promise B, he picked up the phone and gave instructions. So he's active, he's an action person. Not only a talk person, he's an action person.
I want to stick with history because I don't know if you're writing your autobiography.
I'm on page
So,
40.
You're on page 40?
For 6 months now, though.
Clement Roheen in his autobiography has a page in you in which in June 29, 2012 at a meeting at Freedom House, you got upset at some accusations that were made against you. And Roheen has recorded you as saying, if after serving the PPP for 40 years I cannot be trusted, well then, was it precipitous in resigning, given that you were such a huge figure in the PPP? Could you have gone a month on a holiday and cool out and then come back?
But you have to go back a little bit. The 2011, I put myself up as a candidate at the 2011 election for nomination of the PPP presidential candidate. I didn't succeed. It was a period of great tension and unhappiness. At the end of the process, I called together a few people and I said, look, I want you to know that I will end my political career at the next Congress, which was due in 2012. And at that Congress, I will not offer myself up for leadership to the PPP. So a few people knew. I did not participate in the campaign at the elections. And I told Donald Ramatar that I can't participate. I will not participate, but that I'm supporting him fully, and he can rely on that support. I was not in a frame of mind. The simple reason I was not in a frame of mind to go on the platform. So I dropped out at that period. I resumed activity after that because I was called out. And after a call out, I started attending party meetings, executive meetings, and so on a regular basis. I have been writing in the Mirror every week. Every week I've been putting out an article in the Mirror, and I can't remember if I continued writing during the election period. But if I didn't, I certainly resumed, and I wrote this article on corruption. I praised the government. I said the government has done a lot on corruption, but it now needs to do more. And I put a reason. I said, look, corruption will flourish where money is being spent. Under Desmond Hoy, $2 billion was being spent on infrastructure. Now, $20 billion are being spent. So you can expect an increase in corruption, but that steps must be taken to curb it. I met Donald Ramatar at an event before the article came out. I said, I'm writing this article, this is what I'm saying, I hope it's okay with you. He said it's okay with me. So we had a meeting about 2 weeks after the article came out, and I was very violently attacked. And I was told that I'm not a person to be trusted. So Donald was in a chair. I asked for an apology. There was no apology coming. So I got up and walked out, and I was insulted when I walked out, when I was walking out. Now I had to go, I have a driver. I had a driver then as well. When he dropped me at, the meeting was held at the Office of the President. Meetings at the PPP executive were held at the Office of the President at that time. So when my driver takes me there at midday, we go there to have lunch and then the meeting. When he takes me there, he goes out and does some chores for me. And then he brings the car at about 3 o'clock and leaves the key, and he goes away. And I drive home. So when I walked out of the meeting, this was not long after the meeting started, I had to go out. I had to call him to come for me. He was somewhere about the city, and I waited. If somebody had come to me and called me back in, I would have gone. I waited for about 45 minutes out there. Donald phoned me up the next day. I was at home. I didn't take the call. No. If he had come to the gate and stopped the car, called my wife out, I wouldn't have gone out, and tell her I ain't moving from here. I'm not moving from here. I gotta come in. People can start coming and watching and looking. So you would have come in. He went away to St. Lucia. They ain't got telephones in St. Lucia. You can call me from St. Lucia.
Okay, no.
2 weeks after he came back from St. Lucia, called me. Called me on the phone and said, plead and so on. Now, if I were the president and you were an important man, what I would have done is to call you to my office. I want to see you. When you come in, get up and lock the door. I said, none of you ain't moving from here unless you tell me something serious about you and the party. We ain't moving, we ain't going away. We're going to sleep right here. Now, what could I have done under those circumstances? Not give in?
Yeah, it's an assault on 40 years of arms.
So, this is my home. This is people I've known for my whole life, you know. Friends I see every day. So, I didn't have. But when I left the meeting, when I left the area there, I was completely destroyed. I was deflated, destroyed. I went home earlier than usual. My wife was usually upstairs. She heard the noise downstairs and came down. By the time she came down, I had taken off my work clothes, got into my home clothes, sat in my lazy boy, and had the sheet cover me from head to toe. And she couldn't get me to speak. Unknown to me, she thought I had a stroke. Unknown to me, she started to telephone.
Doctors?
No, she started to telephone leaders in the PPP. She couldn't get anybody. She got Komal Chand and Navin Chandapal, or one of the two of them. But the two of them came, kind of gave her a brief idea of what had happened. But I didn't speak again.
So
Till the next day. The next morning, I went to bed. My son and daughter-in-law usually come for dinner. I eventually got up from the chair and so on. I had dinner. I didn't speak to anybody. And I went up after I finished, I went up to bed. Next morning, my wife brought breakfast upstairs. So I had breakfast. I haven't spoken yet. Brought breakfast, had breakfast, and then I asked her to bring my computer, which she did. Type out my resignation and type out the statement to the press, because Sam Hines had resigned and was asked to withdraw it. And I can see the treatment he got after that, treatment of contempt. Do Not Sing was angry at the point of resignation. She said he was going to resign. I was begged and so on to stay, and the contempt that greeted him after that. That was not going to happen to me. I was going to make it public, so I can't recall it. So I did a statement and the thing. When I finished it, I told my wife I'm resigning from the PPP. She didn't ask me why. She said okay. And I got the statement out eventually.
What you're saying here has ever been publicized
I
by
don't-
you in pen and writing? Or,
No, I haven't.
It's very moving,
I haven't.
Gildarie.
I'm listening, I'm riveted by that.
It is the afternoon. The first time I told my wife what happened, I couldn't speak. I couldn't speak. I couldn't utter what had happened. The first time I indicated to her what had happened was in the afternoon.
For you were traumatized then?
Traumatized, severely traumatized.
Do you treat someone who served the party for 40 years like that?
It was terrible. It was probably
You
the
think
worst.
it still affects you? in Freudian ways?
I've overcome it. I've overcome it and forgiven all of those who are involved in these things.
You and Donald still have any good
Yeah,
relations?
Donald and I didn't have a problem. Donald had once said
But he was the president.
I was angry with him because he said it was not a big thing. He said so publicly. He said it was not a big issue. But I meet all these guys regularly and talk to them. You know.
Mr. Ramkarran.
Rory was very critical of me at the time, in the same meeting. Roy was not rude to me or personally hostile. But he was there, and he and I are good friends now.
Interesting conversation.
Well, we didn't know that when we had Rory here, as I would have asked him. It's only now it's coming out. I would have asked Rory, how could you have done that?
Well, it goes. It also drives home the point that the PPP, being the giant that it is, that they had their weak times as well. But it gives you an understanding as to history as well. Mr. Ramkarran, Guyana is emerging into a real powerhouse in the Caribbean, especially. If you were to reach with their finale tomorrow morning he's a president of Guyana, what would you say to him? What advice would you give to him as to how do you raise the level of standards of the people? How would he present himself as a great president of Guyana? What should he do? I would like to hear you as somebody who's experienced.
When they had the trouble at Monrepo, it started somewhere in Golden Grove or
The demonstrators came down from Golden Grove. Yeah.
Well, it was a handful of them. When they came down, I don't know the size of the crowd that reached Monrepo. It was probably about 50 or something in that vicinity. Where these people come from? These males. Where do they come from? They're home. They're not working. This was mid-morning. So I would like to see the president create a situation in this country, in the villages, when you have a rowdy group and they want to come down and create trouble, that there's nobody home to join them. Where? They're all working. The villages, the president needs to concentrate, as he appears to be doing, but you got to do it more. Concentrate on the villages, African villages, Indian villages, Amerindian villages. They need to be upgraded. They need employment opportunities to be created around the villages, close to the villages, so that the people can get jobs. That is what I like to see him do.
50 years in politics, in which you've held some outstanding position, it would be remiss of me not to ask you your opinion on what's going on with the opposition now. Is Aubrey Norton your last choice for your years of experience as a performer, as a PNC leader? Is Aubrey Norton going in the right direction, or he's going to weaken the PNC?
Well, I don't know. It's very, very difficult to predict. The PNC has broken the leadership of the PNC had took a turn that was not conducive to a transition that people might be comfortable with. Why was Carl Greenidge shunted aside by Granger? Carl Greenidge, you see, this thing has the personal. When you look at the issue of personality, it creates a lot of great difficulty for leadership situations. Carl Greenidge should have been the person to take over from Granger. But the enmity, I don't know what enmity, but the situation that was created when the two contested the elections, I think created a the situation that was created made it impossible for Carl Greenidge to have
An endorsement.
endorsement,
From Granger.
a role, or to be seen as a leader. And who they have? Harmon. Now, Harmon is okay. I have nothing wrong, nothing. But comparing Harmon to Greenidge, I think people would have gone for Greenidge at the drop of a hat. So if Granger wanted to go off, he should have brought in Carl and offer to support him if he runs. That would have made a difference.
Would I conclude to say, or would it be right for me to conclude that Aubrey Norton does not have the charisma? Well, you're basically saying that, but he doesn't have the charisma to be.
In my quieter moments, I wonder, is it that Mr. Norton is laying the groundwork for talks with the president? Is he setting the stage? Is he making life difficult for the president, or thinks he is, or attempting to make life difficult for the... So when he talks to the president, he has a bigger hand?
And what would
So
you
you
want?
think,
Let's assume.
you think he's strategizing in that direction?
Could it be? Could it be? I ask myself that. Could it be? He's been around for a very long time. Could it be that he's strategizing to eventually go to the president and say, let's talk?
And what would you be asking for? More seats?
No, resolve the political situation.
You are lawyer, senior counsel. I want to get you on this. I want you now to quote the law for us, for our viewers. Is it legal for the leadership of the PNC to now say there are 9 AFC members of parliament? So you're going to have Justice and Liberty Party having a parliamentarian, the PNC having parliamentarians, and the AFC having parliamentarians, but no AFC party went into the election.
No, they can't do that. There is one list. There's an AFC, there's APNO AFC list. There's one list. No matter how they can designate themselves how they want, but all of them are members of one list. They're not 2 lists.
So you cannot have 9 AFC parliamentarians.
They
And
can say,
they can say
they can say we are of the AFC, but they cannot deny that they belong to one list. David Granger can remove any one of them anytime he wants.
And
So they could just sit down in a part in
They can sit
parliament.
down together, they can ask the clerk to fix their chairs together.
but they could be removed. What Mr. Ramkarran is saying is going to be the elephant in the room. He's saying that David Granger could remove any one of them, maybe all of them, legally. That
But I
is.
think Granger gone in the background. Will Norton give 9 seats to the 8
No,
parliament?
but Norton is not the man. It's Granger.
Oh, yes, Granger's the leader of the list.
I forgot. The person who fixes the seating would be Mr. Norton or anybody representing him on his side of the house. The person who fixes the seats, where each person sits, in his team, which is APNO AFC team, the person who fixes who sits where is Mr. Norton or his representative, his whip. And they will tell the clerk where they want to sit. So AFC can't just go and sit in any seat.
No, but I wanted to drive home this last point here, Mr. Ramkarran. I need to ask you from a legal perspective. Could David Granger or Aubrey Norton remove all the AFC people right now, as it is?
Yes.
Under the recall legislation.
Yes.
So tomorrow morning, if Aubrey Norton wakes up and says, I don't want any of this, or I don't want anybody else from the AFC to sit in Parliament, but I could take maybe 7 other or 9 other persons and I could put them any person of his choice. Is that a likely scenario? Could a scenario like that happen?
Yes. Technically speaking,
You listen to that, Freddie?
technically speaking, David Granger has to do it because he's the head of the list, but not obviously the leader of the
I look-
Now, let me mention this, that will be, you have noticed that Comrade Ramkarran has said that they are supporting the policies of the opposition, of the APNU. So far you're supporting APNU. So that gives me an indication
That he's aware.
that they want to ensure that they remain in Parliament and remain with their seats.
Time is going to go through. I wanted to ask you, I asked you your opinion on Barnum Nagamutu. Is Chedi Jagan an exceptional Caribbean leader that we would not see in a generation to come?
Yes, because, you know, I have this theory. Cherry started out life, and if you read his 1947 speeches in the Legislative Council, it's about poverty. What drove him was poverty. He could not tolerate poverty when he saw so much wealth about. There's no other person in Guyana and no other person in the Caribbean region who started with a desire to eliminate poverty and held it for the whole of his life. The whole of his life. Everything he did, all the policies he advocated, his socialist ideas, his Marxist ideas, everything. The bottom line was how to eliminate poverty, how to get rid of poverty. And nobody else has done that or I will ever see in the little that remains of my life.
Will this parliament ever see a parliamentarian like your father? I don't think there's anyone where party is the word for it. I don't think anyone could just instinctively reply to someone and got the whole parliament laughing. That man had a special talent for that. You should see his father in parliament.
He's a heckler. He was a good heckler.
It's what he says. It's
not only what he says.
This guy was funny, bad.
And that's Boise Ramkarran.
Yeah.
Comedians understand something called timing. Timing.
Yes.
What he had that nobody else had was timing.
Oh.
I was in Parliament. I used to go to wait for a drop and so on. A drop home. He had a car I didn't have. I was a school teacher for a while. And then I was a school boy and then school teacher. So I used to come home with him. So I'd go and wait in Parliament if Parliament is on. So Viola Burnham, Mrs. Burnham, had something was wrong with her shoulder. My father knew both of them very well, I might say. And it was published in the paper. She had a frozen shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
The wild rumor in the country was that Burnham assaulted his wife, Viola, and hit her in her shoulder, and she got injured in her shoulder. So I was in Parliament. Nobody knew this would ever happen. So I was in Parliament. Burnham was there before 1980, so Burnham was Prime Minister. So he sauntered in late. And when he came in, at that time he had developed an aura, you know. So he came in and silence fell in the room, in the chamber. So my father talked across. How Viola Forbes. And there was silence. But you can't tell Burnham things like that. Nobody can dare do that. So the PPP laughed. The people on the PPP side burst out in laughter. Smiles started on the opposition face, and then Burnham smiled. When he smiled, he gave them permission to laugh. So everybody laughed. Now, that was not anything witty, it was not any joke or anything, but it was timing, using the silence, using Burnham's deliberateness to just ask him a wicked question.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately we have run out of time, and we have had some interesting conversations, some insights, historical insights, special moments in time, significant moments in time with regards to the PPP in Parliament, and telling us is no other than Mr. Ramkarran, former senior member of the People's Progressive Party, former Speaker of the House. Lots of knowledge, very sharp as well. Freddie, very quickly, you've got about 20 seconds. Anything you want to say?
Well, I think I am satisfied that history has been recorded here. What Mr. Ramkarran said, I hope researchers are taking note of it. It has been quite a revelation.
And
I have to say, I'm sorry he went through that trauma. You don't serve a party for that long and be treated like that.
There were other traumas, but I'll save those for next time.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, there's something else I must say to you today. I didn't have permission from the two gentlemen. They were the two gentlemen that you see seated next to me here. When it comes to writing in the newspaper, they would have been in some really bitter fights over the years. But it is interesting for us as a people that we could sit at the table here and have a discussion in a very mature manner.
Let me ask the cameraman to put us in the frame.
I'm a very young man.
I have known her for a long time.
Yeah, I'm a very young person compared to the two gentlemen that side of me. And
I have a positive opinion.
Yeah, when you see those kind of conversations happening, I am happy.
You know what I said?
Yeah.
Hold on. I said in many columns, and I'm saying this again. So it's there in my column. If Ramkarran was a presidential candidate in 2011, I think the PPP would have won the election.
Yeah, you have said that.
And so it is good for us to have those kind of conversation. On Monday, we will be back with you, same place, same time. I want to say thank you to my co-host as usual, Freddie Kissoon, and of course to our guest, Mr. Ralph Ramkarran, an institution of knowledge. Have a pleasant rest of the night, ladies and gentlemen.